Hey, everybody, welcome into an emergency podcast here. Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller with you. And this is news of the magnitude that we have pulled out Jeremiah Sirles here, former Minnesota Viking, for the Vikings announcement, or well, I should say Tom Pelissero reporting now, I'm sure it will be announced soon, that general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been fired by the Minnesota Vikings. And I will say that this is something, Jeremiah, that you and I had discussed off the air about this possibility. And in the league, we've seen general managers be fired after the draft a lot of times because you go through that whole draft process, you need somebody leading it. And usually when people are fired, executives, coaches, etc., it comes in the days right after your season ends. Normally, a general manager would not end the season, hold a press conference talking about the decisions that they made that caused them to miss the playoffs. And then several weeks later, and my understanding is that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has been at the Shrine Bowl and has been at the Senior Bowl, and then is all of the sudden fired as we approach February here. So the timing, I think, is pretty surprising. After the draft wouldn't have been a shock. After the season would not have been a shock. But right now, and there's only one way to really look at that, Jeremiah, which is that the quarterback in the Super Bowl is Sam Darnold. And you have said the phrase many times, someone gets thrown into the volcano. Well, when your biggest decision of the entire regime goes the way that it did, with Darnold making the Super Bowl and the Minnesota Vikings sitting here watching at home with no playoff appearance, and your quarterback was one of the worst in the entire NFL, this is what happens. Like, there are consequences. And just the other day, I wrote about process versus results and how a lot of people will sort of hide behind, well, our process was good, the results just didn't turn out that way. But there are consequences to results, regardless of whether you liked your process or you did not like your process. And today we see the results of that as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is fired. But I think it goes a lot deeper than just Sam Darnold making the Super Bowl. And we can get into all of that as we go forward. And I will say that I had already written an article about this in preparation because I had a feeling that it could happen. So what is your instant reaction to the firing of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah?
Yeah, I'm torn on the fact that I think that it was probably warranted, but also I feel like it's a little emotional by the Wilfs. And we don't see emotional decisions by the Wilfs all that often. I feel like they are very thought out, very characteristic, very understanding of what they want to do in the vision. But like I said when we recorded on Monday, the Wilfs woke up on Monday morning going, "What the hell just happened? How did we let this happen?" And so now going back and looking through every decision that's been made, looking through all the draft picks, all the free agent signings, how the roster was put together, they're looking at all of that going, okay, where'd we miss? How'd it go wrong? And you really can point to one person, and it's Kwesi. And so it had to be him. It had to be him. And I think for them, they're going, okay, if we don't believe in his process, we don't believe in that now, we better get him out before he drafts someone else. We better get him out. We better find someone in here to lead the way. One thing I do know about the Vikings scouting staff is they're all very, very tenured there. They've all been there a very long time. So this isn't something where Kwesi's going to go and now every scout's going to just follow along. Mike Charlaton's been there forever. Rob Brzezinski's been there forever. Like, there's a lot of really good high level people that have survived regime changes. And so that probably also gave them a little bit of peace of like, hey, if we lose the GM, we're not just going to be starting from scratch on draft prep here. But it needed to be an emotional decision, which is surprising to me. And we're one press conference away from the Wilfs interrupting KOC saying, Kwesi's the one that wanted to keep JJ McCarthy. I wanted Sam Darnold from this coming full circle moment.
Well, I don't think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has ever hid from the fact that he wanted to take advantage of the rookie quarterback contract, and that was the plan for a very long time.
Mhm.
And I have always praised the overall big picture 30,000 foot view plan, which was to take down the old roster and build up a new roster while adding a lot of free agents around a rookie quarterback contract. The issue with what happened here was that life in the NFL sometimes throws you something that you never expect, like a meniscus injury and like a former number 3 overall quarterback who comes in and wins 14 games, and then you decide to let him go. Now, the issue that I would have is putting it all onto Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and saying, oh, well, this is this man's fault. This is the bad man. He's the one that did it. When I think we can all use our little common sense hats and put them on and say, well, Kevin O'Connell was known as the quarterback whisperer all of last year. He was talked about constantly after winning Coach of the Year about how he got the most out of Sam Darnold, how he could elevate a quarterback. He was the one that led the traveling search party to Oregon and Washington and DC or whatever it was, and Michigan to land on J.J. McCarthy. And he's also the one that stood in front of a microphone in Berea, Ohio, and said that J.J. McCarthy is our franchise quarterback. So when it comes to who should be the one that, evaluates this entire decision and carry the most weight for their opinion, Kevin O'Connell is supposed to be that guy. And I am hard pressed to believe that if Kevin O'Connell had pounded his fist on the table and said, we cannot let Sam Darnold walk out of this building, that they wouldn't have found a way to keep him, most likely with the franchise tag. But when you listen to O'Connell last March, he said multiple times the line that he loved to use was, he's earned the right for free agency. Well, not really, because there was always a franchise tag, right? But that didn't scream to me in any way, no public comment that I ever heard from Kevin O'Connell, I want someone else at quarterback other than J.J. McCarthy. And they also had a chance to sign Aaron Rodgers. They did not do that either. So they were all in as a franchise. Everyone is responsible for Sam Darnold leaving. Everyone is responsible for J.J. McCarthy and his performance this year, that it could have been projected, it could have been coached better, it could have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that this comes down to more than just Sam Darnold making the Super Bowl on this plan. And as we sort of peel back the layers of the last few years, I know that people will focus on the drafting. I know that that's where you look. The first impression, I think we have to go back at this moment to 2022, and the first impressions in those first 2 years of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, starting with that 2022 draft, that it was his big plan to trade out of that draft pick, to stack up a bunch of draft capital, and to try to fix probably too many problems at once. And I think he admitted to this at one point, saying, it felt like he was trying to solve every single problem in one single draft, which he needed all those picks. And it blew up in his face in ways that we've almost never seen. And there's a ton of luck involved, and I've been over that many, many times. But I think that was the start of kind of losing people in the building, or not getting the belief that he needed in the building and the backing that he needed to have that go as wrong as it did. And then into 2023, well, let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into 2023 offseason, because something happened that has not been talked about a whole lot that I think is worth discussing now that this has happened. But in the 2022 draft, I think that your first impression matters so much. And as you said, when you keep a lot of the same scouts, when you keep a lot of the same executives who loved Rick Spielman, and many of them were hired by Rick Spielman, and I've been curious for quite a while about where certain leaks come from. And it always seemed to be angled toward making Kwesi Adofo-Mensah look bad from inside that front office, or causing a little chaos from inside that front office. And my thought was, because they did not let Kwesi Adofo-Mensah have all of his people, I think that it was hard for him to get the belief of people inside the building behind him, because they weren't his guys. And then his first impression was, wow, you just made a total calamity of the first draft that you were operating.
Yeah, the first impression that I got from him, I mean, even when we first hired him, was he's not a football guy.
Yeah.
Right. That was kind of my number one impression of, okay, he is, and there's a place for this in football, analytics and how you want to plan and structure and numbering and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the great GMs, in my opinion, are football junkies. They love the game. They love the players. They can see a player and see not just the dollar sign, but see the intangibles that come with that player. And when you're not a football guy, and I mean, people probably listen to me like, well, what's a football guy? It's like you eat, live, and breathe this stuff. Like it's every waking moment you're thinking about how to win a Super Bowl. Every waking moment you're thinking about putting that roster together from a leadership perspective, a development perspective, a talent perspective, not just an analytics perspective. And when he started doing the trades and, well, we need this and we need that, we need thing, it just screamed to me analytics. And analytics is good and there's a place for it in football, but there's not a great place for it in the building. In the building, especially in the head man in the building, both head man, the head ball coach and the GM, in my opinion, need to be incredible football junkies. And so with that being the first impression, and then for it to go as wrong as it did, kind of solidified does he really understand the football aspect of this? Does he really get what's going on from the broader perspective of building a locker room, building a culture? And then I felt like that left Kevin O'Connell in a place to kind of pick up the pieces, right? Hey, I'll ride with this group. Just believe in me. Just get and had to kind of overcome a lot of the shortcomings in that piece of it. And then that started down this track of question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, that when followed him through free agency, into the next year's draft, into roster decisions, into coaching decisions, into all kinds of different things, that he did some good things, but there was always that underlying question of, does this guy get it from a football perspective?
And I think this has been an issue. This gets us into 2023 because, look, I'll say all day long that drafts, and Rick Spielman could tell you this, they're very hard, but they're also very random. And in 2015, it's the best draft you've ever seen. And in 2016, your friends Mackenzie Alexander and Laquan Treadwell did not work out anywhere near Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter, because that's the nature of the beast. But first impressions die hard, as people still ask Sam Darnold about seeing ghosts, which he was 21 years old in 2018 against the team that won the Super Bowl on defense. That's when he said that, and yet still people bring it up and throw it in his face. That is always a major factor, and I think that hurt the overall viewpoint. I also think it was a major challenge, and this takes us into 2023. A major challenge for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to understand how to run an entire franchise. And this is something that, when you talk about background, it probably does matter. Where you look at Rick Spielman, and his brother is in the NFL, and Rick played football, and then he was a scout, and then he grinded, and he was in 1,000 scouting meetings, and he worked for a bunch of GMs. And then by the time that, Spielman got to be an executive in Miami, and he had done that, and then he gets to the Vikings, this man understands deeply through and through the culture of how you run a building. And Rick, I think, for shortcomings that he had with some decision making on the roster, was always very good at knowing people, understanding people, connecting with people inside the building. He looked like a scout. He talked like a scout. And he also, I think, really treated people well. From all of my interactions and all the people that I know inside the building, I think you would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Kwesi did not. I'm saying that that culture right there is sort of like if you go to a new school and they do different things than you've ever done before. They don't operate like maybe you did in Cleveland where you were, or you're in a leadership spot that you have to connect with people on a different way. And then the thing in 2023 offseason is kind of hard to fully get into, because it's one of those things where if you understand football culture, you would say, oh, that's really normal that people would be unhappy. And if you don't, you would think this is insane that anyone would be upset about. So I'm not going to go super deep into that. But there was for sure a communication gap in 2023 during that offseason, as the Vikings were trying to get some things together to bring in some people during training camp, that led to I don't even want to call it a clash. You know what I'm talking about. I just don't really want to go down this road because it gets very muddy. But that offseason and then into when Kirk got hurt and they brought in Dobbs, Flacco ends up taking a team to the playoffs. It felt like throughout that year that the connection corroded in terms of, are you really the person in charge? Is it really Kevin O'Connell who is in charge or who wants to be more in charge of what goes on with this roster and has more control? And the rumors at that point started to come out that, hey, maybe they might just move on from this because that connection is not what it needs to be. And so there were people, and this is one thing that I know, is there were other executives around the league in 2023 into 2024 who were preparing their applications, who were preparing their resumes, who were getting their agents ready to go to the Minnesota Vikings to present their clients as potential general manager fits. And it's not like some scandal or anything. It's more of just a communication connection between him, the rest of the front office, the belief from the coaching staff and the rest of the front office. And where this would really start to show up is they crushed the 2024 offseason. So this naturally really, really helped with, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's case. But you never heard coaches ever give the front office credit for finding those players. It was always, Brian Flores, got Andrew Van Ginkel. Flores told us the tale of being neighbors with Blake Cashman's former coach, and that's how they got him. And then we would start to hear this from everything. It was, well, Isaiah Rodgers was a great signing. Oh, that was B-Flow, right? And so it felt like what they did not have is a general manager who wielded the power anymore to tell the coaches this is where the line gets drawn with roster stuff. And that dynamic, I think, was not on the same page even into this offseason. I have an example of that I want to get into. But like, what is your feeling there about how important that is to have the coaches and the general manager, that sort of distribution of power, and maybe the adult in the room general manager who can put a fist down and say, this is not what we're doing, or I'm not spending the money on this player, or I'm not spending the draft capital on this trade. And that's final. It did not feel like Kwesi Adofo-Mensah had that power by the end.
Yeah, I think he lost a lot of that power in the 23 season when, again, in the 22 season, Kevin O'Connell had to pick up the pieces, right? And as he picked up those pieces, he gained more trust from the players. Because we're not stupid, right? The players inside that building see what's going on, right? Ask Kellen Mond. He saw it. His two guys didn't talk to each other, right? I saw it my last year there, the Norv deal. And, there's just certain times where you can tell when mommy and daddy are fighting at the dinner table. And when you see that happening, someone comes out as a winner in that. And Kevin O'Connell came out as the winner. And so whoever comes out in the winner has the respect of the players. And when you have the respect of the players inside the building, you have all the power, all of it, right? You know that you can do anything. And then once you take that to the GM and be like, they don't like you, they like me, sit down, I now make the decisions, that's when the fracture happens. Boom. And from there, I don't think that Kwesi was ever able to regain control. I think he would give suggestions. I think he would say, this is what we should do. This is what I think we should do. And if Kevin O'Connell agreed with him, he'd say, yeah, sure, let's do that. And if he didn't, he'd say, yeah, no, we're going to go ahead and just keep doing this, but appreciate your input. And when you have that dynamic, and I'm not saying that to say that Kevin was wrong in taking the power. He probably felt in order to win, in order to do what he needed to do, he had to do that. Because when you don't feel that the leadership is strong at the front, you know that it trickles down. And we all know that the Wilfs, for the most part, incredible owners. They do a great job. They pour a lot of resources, so that's strong there. So then the GM being the next link there, if you don't have full faith in that link in the chain, you have to jump it as a coach, or else it's not going to continue down, and it's going to trickle, and it's going to really start to fall apart at the bottom. And so I think Kevin was right in having to do that and take that power over. But from there on, it was a constant power struggle. And then it just seemed like more and more power left Kwesi, in my opinion, and more went to Kevin. And so when you're looking at this piece there, where did the fracture come from? That's where it started. And then it only continued to grow and grow. And then it kind of reconciled, like you said, going into the 24 off season, because it worked out well for everyone.
Right. And then you would think that when a team is put together as well as it was in 2024 and wins 14 games and is sort of the belle of the ball of the NFL, where you have players giving them A pluses and coach of the year and awards and all these things, that there would be no real mystery about whether the general manager would sign his contract extension. And yet that dragged and dragged and dragged. And I always thought, well, I mean, hey, if it's not done by a certain date, then it's a little bit, of a mystery. And if it's not done by, and that date kept moving back and back and back and back. And then finally it happens. And even some of the comments that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah had made about his contract extension were a little bit suspicious, because it sort of made it sound like this isn't going very well, or they're not really even working on it, or whatever it was. And then finally it gets done, and you go, all right, well, maybe that feeling that I had, that little spidey sense of a reporter that something isn't quite right here, maybe it is just that kind of narrative that has existed with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, that he's different and he can't draft and et cetera, et cetera. And that's what's shading how we evaluate this situation. But I don't think that it's normal that Brian Flores wouldn't sign his, and then Kwesi took forever to sign his, and then Flores returns, and then they fire Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and you're going, okay, some of these lines are not exactly getting crossed. Now, where I felt that there was a possibility this was going to be over, and I do want to circle back to the Sam Darnold thing and that decision, everything else, was actually last offseason, before the start of the season, when they traded for Adam Thielen. So I may be skipping a little bit, because I guess, no, let me say this first, that I thought that there was a possibility this would happen with the amount of spending the Wilfs had. And so as an analytics enjoyer, and I interviewed Kwesi for my book, and Kwesi knows analytics. Okay. I mean, inside and out. I've covered the analytics world for 15 years, and he knows what he's talking about. But when you look at those moves that they made, you go, where's the analytics? Show me where it is. Like older players, injury histories, guys who coaches would love because of name recognition, but the numbers had pointed arrow down, and then big contracts for those guys with big dead cap hits if it doesn't go right. And you go, none of that really looks like analytics to me. And even the approach to the draft, let's select a guard who I really like, but let's select a guard to, as Kwesi put it, keep the ball on the fairway. And you're like, well, what an introduction for Donovan Jackson. I'm the ball on the fairway. But I think that sort of told us the story. Like, this is coaches who are doing this stuff, or it seems like these are coach-like moves. And then you get to the Adam Thielen thing. And what I could say that I have been told about the Adam Thielen thing, it was a bad trade. We all know that. They gave up too much. We all know that. Is that was one of those deals that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in his spreadsheets did not like. And he didn't like how much they were giving up for Adam Thielen. And that was one where it was, sorry, Kwesi, we're doing this regardless. And this is happening. And this is where I don't believe the Wilfs to be meddling owners overall, but it was like, we want him, so we're getting him, and that's final. And if you don't have a general manager who has the voice in the room to say, this is a bad move, we are not doing it. And if you can't say that and then be taken seriously, you can't really be the general manager of this team. And that's where I think that what someone needs to do as the new general manager is be that voice in the room who tells the coaches, no, we're not doing that. We are not giving Jonathan Allen this contract. We are not giving Javon Hargrave this contract just because you guys want it, because that's not a good contract to give. I think credibility is really necessary, and someone who is now the least tenured person, which is usually you have the power if you're the new person, and a new liaison to the ownership that can evaluate the coaches, because they are going to have now a decision into the future, unless they go into the playoffs and go to the Super Bowl, of what to do with Kevin O'Connell. So their new general manager will now be that voice to the ownership that is separate, instead of like, you guys are, in the room together and we decide together. Now it's the GM's going to tell us whether we should go forward with this head coach. The GM now, when he says no, the ownership is going to trust him because they've brought him in. I think that dynamic is very complicated, but now it makes a lot of sense for why they would move on for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah.
Yeah, and I mean that's a great point, and the timing of it too, like you opened with, is so fascinating because now where do you go look for a GM right now? Like, are you poaching somebody else's GM? Are you trying to go like executive hunting? Like, it's just a very odd timeline. I don't know if I can ever really remember a GM fired at the first week in February. Like, it's just a strange timeline for that. And so you, as an ownership group, I hope you kind of have someone in mind. Like that's my thing. I hope you have someone in mind or a specific type of candidate. Maybe it's not a certain someone, but hey, this is the candidate in which you need to go get, which checks all those boxes you just talked about. Maybe they feel that Kevin O'Connell has grown too big, right? Maybe there's a piece of that plays into this firing too, where they're like, we love Kevin, but he has gone power hungry and power control and not making rash decisions for the organization, but making decisions to keep his job. And that's where the general manager has to play that middle ground, right? Hey, yes, I get it, Kevin. You want to keep your job, you want to win now. I can't put the Vikings in cap hell till 2031. There has to be that buffer. There has to be that voice of reason in the middle that sits in both camps. And as an ownership group, if you go to your GM, right? I mean, maybe it wasn't the ownership group saying, "Hey, we don't want to get this done," but they're trying to tell Kwesi, "Hey, we don't want this to be done." And Kwesi's like Kevin's puppet, and he's like, "No, we're doing this. We're doing this." And so he then like finally just falls into Kevin and says, "Yes, we're going to do it." As an ownership group, you kind of got to look at that and go, "We need someone to be able to advocate for both sides, not just fall into the pressure of whatever side gives it." And so looking at that, you need a guy that's been around the block for a long time. You need someone that I think comes from a winning culture, right? And that's another piece that we talked about him coming from Cleveland. Hearing what's coming out of Cleveland right now, that place is not functioning at a high level. And so when you're asking someone to come in and bring it all together, right, that could have been a first red flag. But then you also look at just the relationship dynamic of those three people, and you've been around it, right? Head coach, GM, ownership, they all have to be on the same page, but you also have to know that at the end of the day, the buck stops with the GM from the coaches and the ownership from the GM. Like there has to be a pure power pyramid or a power tower. And I think when that gets jumbled, that's when things really start to go crazy. And that's what happened here. The power dynamic between those three people got crazy. Also makes me wonder how much power did they give B-Flow to come back, right? How much of this was, hey, Brian, you want to come back? And well, yeah, you can have final say over free agents. You can have final say. And did the ownership group look at that contract and go, whoa, crazy, what'd you just do here? Like, how much power do these guys now have? There's so many avenues to try and figure out what it was that broke all this. I don't know. It's super fascinating to think about because I do think at the end of the day, it just came down to he did not have enough power over the coaches.
Well, and this is something that I had asked you off the air because it had been sort of bouncing around the football universe about like how much say does Kwesi Adofo-Mensah have after Brian Flores comes back? And the answer that I kept getting was none. And if you're going to have a general manager with no power, then you don't have a general manager. Then he's what? Like making sure the Lando Lake sign gets on the outside at training camp? Like what exactly are you doing if you're not the guy that people are answering to? And when I remember talking to Scott Studwell, who, you know, Vikings legend, but he's also a legend in the scouting world. And I was asking him like what that dynamic was like with Rick Spielman. And he said to me that they would do their reports, they would have their discussions, and then Rick had the final say, and that's how it was, and they all respected that. And I think to use Rick as that example of someone with Studwell's credibility saying, like, that's how it works, and I respected that, and I appreciated that that's how we did it. It didn't feel like it was, here is the chain of command, and then here is the final decision maker, and that is that. And when you talk about that communication between coach and general manager, now Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has said, you know, many times that he and Kevin O'Connell, you know, communicate a lot and that they're talking every day. And I don't doubt that. I think from a personal perspective, that relationship always seemed to be fine from that aspect of it. But if you have a head coach and a general manager that aren't on the same page when it comes to that, that is reminiscent of Spielman and Zimmer, who I think individually, Rick Spielman was overall a very good general manager and built successful teams in multiple different places. And I think Mike Zimmer was overall an excellent head coach before things, corroded. But once they corroded, then that's when the finger pointing came out. I mean, I remember talking to Rick in 2017 about how they built the defensive line. Like each individual guy, how they got there and their stories. And it was great of Rick to sit down with me and everything. It was really fun to go through the backgrounds and everything else. But the main idea that Rick kept going back to is, well, this is what Mike wants. And this is what my job to find. Mike wants it this way. Mike wants it that way. And we talk about it and everything else. And by the end, they weren't even talking. And if that connection isn't good, someone's got to go. And in this case, it's a hell of a lot easier to fire a GM than it is to fire Kevin O'Connell. And I guess now that, who knows, like what could happen next? They're firing people on January 30th. I thought it was my day off. I've made 10 podcasts this week and they fired the general manager. But, the point just being that when that happens, if you look at the coaching candidates who are available at this coach search, it's very underwhelming. It's hard to find a good head coach. There were 10 guys hired in 2022. There are 2 that remain, and Todd Bowles is on the hot seat, and KOC is under the white hot light. It's not easy to just go out and find a new head coach. It is not that hard to go out and find another executive who may have some credibility or is kind of the next man in line that everybody's known about for a long time. I think of like Atlanta, they interviewed a lot of good coaches. Brant Tillis, who's has that Kansas City connection and then over to Carolina and helped turn them around. And, there's a lot of people like that. That just sort of came to my mind, but I think you can find that person a lot easier than you could find someone to operate an entire locker room, an entire training staff, an entire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the one struggle for me here, Jeremiah, where I really run into a tough time getting over the hurdle is even despite some of this stuff we're talking about, the functionality, the relationships, the power dynamics, everything that makes football so interesting when it's not actually being played. The roster was good. I thought it was real good. And when it was healthy on the offensive line, they had several of the best performances we've seen since you and I have covered the offensive line. And they got the Jefferson extension done. The Darisaw extension, when they did it, looked phenomenal because no one knew he was going to tear his ACL. The Hockenson trade looked terrific and no one knew he was going to tear his ACL. The defense was in the top 5 in points allowed per drive, yards allowed per drive. They drafted the best kicker in the United States of America or abroad. And at the time we were like, I don't know, is that a good draft pick? And it turns out to be a great draft pick. They found an undrafted free agent in Jalen Redmond, who is a borderline star. They've made a lot of good moves on this team. And I keep coming back to that if Bo Nix is the quarterback or Mac Jones is the quarterback, they're in the playoffs. We feel good about the franchise. Like not even Sam Darnold, but that when you evaluate, no matter how you got to this point, it still was a very good roster, which really I think tells you that it's about everything else.
Yes.
Except for, did you actually have good players?
I haven't brought the roster up once yet.
Yeah.
Right. Because I agree with you. I agree with you. Most of the time you point to a GM and you go, dude, this roster is dog crap. Right? Like we don't have anything to win with here. We can't win with this roster. We can't win with the pieces that you put on the board. Like obviously you got to go. That's why I think I am right with you in this. It is something else. It is something behind the doors that are closed. It is the power dynamic. It is the who answers to who. It is all of that. And that's also why I think this was a little emotional. I think this was a little bit of an emotional decision, either one way or the other. And the thing that I've been thinking about more since I read this, Matthew, and I look at this and I go, how much of this was to honestly shift everything to Kevin O'Connell and say, here's your rope, run with it or hang yourself, man. Like, I don't know. This is how it's going to go. Like you now have all the chips are on your pile now, right? You wanted Kwesi. Maybe he was the one that went to ownership group and said, hey, I want Kwesi gone. Like I want to be in. Okay, fine. You make all the decisions. You will live and die by those decisions. You will be the head coach or not by all those decisions. And really, you and Flores now are driving this ship, and that will be very telling on who they hire. if they hire someone that is not the voice, the adult in the room, the power commander, and it's another, I mean, I'm not going to say like a bad hire, but it's another one of those hires where you're kind of going, okay, like I can see that there. That for me is going all the powers in KOC's hands. And I'm okay with that to an extent because you are saying go forth and conquer your way. And if it doesn't work, there's no one else to look around and go, his fault, his fault, his fault. It will all fall onto you. Now, that's the issue that becomes where he's going to go, okay, spend all the money now. I don't care what happens in 2028. Like, I'm not even going to be here if it goes wrong. That's where it could get a little bit sticky. But I do think there is a piece of that with this Wilf's decision where it is right now and the timing of it that is giving KOC a lot of room here to operate. And if it doesn't go well, it all will come crumbling back down at his feet.
Let's circle back to the beginning because some people are just joining the live show. Welcome everyone. The Vikings have fired their general manager. Just was about to walk the dog.
Happy February.
Yeah, I know. Holy cow. You really think that you're past those things when you get this deep into it, which the timing, Jeremiah, right or wrong, because we just spent a lot of time looking at all the potential other reasons for this and stuff like that. But the timing makes it really appear that Sam Darnold reaching the Super Bowl is the reason that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is fired. I don't think that it is the only reason that they have decided to change general managers, as we just went through. You need trust between the coach and the general manager. You need belief from the top of the organization down that you have someone who is in command. That a lot of the NFL, what people don't understand is it's like an office building. I mean, you have someone who is your manager and you have meetings and you go through and someone runs those meetings. And if you don't believe that that person is really in charge, then you feel like a lot of that's kind of a waste and you're more of talking to the coaches than you are to the general manager. So it's funny how that kind of works out. All that dynamic and everything else that we just discussed is very, very relevant. But if the reason that they decided to fire Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is that Sam Darnold made the Super Bowl, then I could not agree with that. I could not say that this is the right thing to do is to can one person. Now, if you fired everybody, then maybe that's different. But if you fire one person and point the finger and say, that's the bad man, that's the guy who caused this, he's the one who screwed us on Sam Darnold, and nobody else is responsible except him, that to me doesn't sit well. It also is, wait a minute, are we doing this again? Because the reason you got rid of Sam Darnold, and just follow me down the path here, the reason you got rid of Sam Darnold was because he played bad in 2 games, which is not a good idea to grade someone who won 14 games and was a top 10 quarterback on 2 games. So are you now grading your general manager on 2 more Sam Darnold games, which went well for him in the playoffs, and he doesn't even play for you? Like that's an odd way to make a final decision. But there's a little bit of history in this that it could be the case. Because, and we're going to hear, I'm sure, from Mark Wilf, and we're going to get an explanation as best we can from Mark Wilf at some point, I'm sure. But when you go back to 2019, when I was in the press box in the Superdome, I was told that if the Vikings lost the game, Mike Zimmer was probably getting traded to the Dallas Cowboys or fired. And they won the game, and he got an extension. How can you do football decisions like that? You can't do, oh, well, here's the coin toss. Oh, it's tails. Mike's fired. Oh, it's at, what is this? No Country for Old Men? Like, that's not the way this should work.
But that's the world we live in. I mean, people can say that Harbaugh was going to get fired regardless if they made that field goal or they don't. That's a load of crap.
Right.
That's a load of crap. If they're in the playoffs and then they squeak out a playoff win, they aren't going to be like, well, we decided to fire him in week 16. It is so razor thin margin in the NFL with win, lose, or draw. You think Sean McDermott gets fired if they're going to the Super Bowl because they end up beating the Patriots next week? It's so, what have you done for me? And so microcosmed, and the season is so long that you sometimes forget what happens in weeks 1 through 16 because of what happens 17 through the playoffs. And that is why I do believe that if they were to fire him at the end of the draft, I would fully be able to say, and Sam Darnold wins the Super Bowl, and we get through free agency, and there's some pieces in the process that they don't like. I think then you can point to, yes, Sam was probably the linchpin in all of this, but to fire him right now, that's the bigger question of Mark is like, why now? Why right now? Why on January 30th after he's done scouting at the Shrine Bowl, after there's the picture of him watching the one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl and looking for the next big fella and all those things? What happened? What was there an issue that we were not made aware of? Was there really truly this bad of a culture inside the building? Like, what was it that who went to you and said this has to be done now? Who was the whistleblower, for a lack of better terms, that said, hey, we can't have this guy leading free agency? Free agency starts in like 6 weeks. Like, we're not far away. The combine is not far away. These interviews that are going to be taking place down at the Senior Bowl have already happened. Like, what happened where now you're saying kind of start over at this general manager position? That's, for me, is where it's an emotional decision by the Wilfs, and I hope it doesn't come back to haunt them. I really do, because I do cheer for the Vikings and I do root for them as a people that gave me so much in my life and gave me the opportunity to play in so many awesome opportunities. I root for the Wilfs in that organization. I hope this non-rational emotional decision doesn't come back to hurt them in a way that's going to affect free agency, because unless you slam dunk hire this, you forget about the human element of free agency. Right? The human element, the numbers is great, and some guys will always chase the bag and always chase the biggest number. But you're talking about a GM position that has to walk in there and not do that, but cut people and make room for the cap. Because just because you fire GM does not mean that magic $50 million over the cap number just goes with him. Now you're asking someone to come in, and the first thing they're going to have to do is make incredibly hard decisions of who stays, who goes, who restructures, who do we pay. That's not a super desirable thing for me if I'm looking to go be my first time GM, if that's the case.
Right. Welcome to Minnesota, new GM. You are in at least kind of the middle of the ocean on the quarterback position, where you don't know if your young guy can make it. His early returns are very bad, and you are 50 million over the cap, which means you've got to go to the ownership right away and say, hey, we kind of need to convert a bunch of stuff. Do you have like $1 zillion that I can use to do that? You have to go to any free agents you want and convince them, hey, would you like to sign a multi-year deal? And like, who's going to be here for my multi-year deal? And you agent folk are pretty clever when it comes to this stuff. You know who's solidified in their job, who could be on the hot seat. And are you signing a 3-year deal with a team that you're not sure if that's the offensive system they're going to be in?
If you
overpay.
Right?
If you overpay, right? Yeah,
I will always sign it. If
right.
Everything has a price. Right. And that's the part that's hard. Yeah. Well, who's going to be here? I don't know. Okay. We'll tack on a couple guaranteed more million there in year 2 and 3, and maybe we'll get this done.
Right. And the functionality of the Vikings organization is one of the things that every player cited as being attractive to them. Like, well, they've got this good situation, and, everybody feels welcome here, and, they're pretty solidified, and their coach and GM are on the same contract and everything else. And then now all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what the hell was going on there for them to do that? And also, if I make a mistake, will you just get rid of me too? Because that's what you did with the general manager when you made a mistake with the quarterback. Now, with the Sam Darnold decision, I do think that Kwesi does not deserve to be the sole owner of that, although it's being made to be that this week, I'm sure. With now it gets added on not only to Sam not see ghosts, but he got his GM fired. My former GM, he was so good that he got somebody else fired. That gets to be part of the narrative. He is also not without responsibility, because he wanted to, and I know this from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, when he got here, he wanted to swing for the Super Bowl. He did not want to swing for first round outs. That's what the previous regime tried to do to save their jobs. And he accidentally, and I want to get a little tiny bit into this, but like accidentally told a reporter from Yahoo, and when he first got here, you win the Super Bowl with great quarterbacks, and Kirk is only a good quarterback. So accidentally manipulating your starting quarterback from day one was not exactly the thing that he was aiming for, I think, through the media. And I think that what JJ McCarthy and this plan represented for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was the swing at the Super Bowl. Was if he's sitting home watching Drake May, he's going, should have been us. And I think that's another thing about Kwesi Adofo-Mensah here when you talk about the analytics, and I don't speak for him. He did not tell me this. I've got to think in 2023 he was sitting there thinking, could we just lose these games? And can we just get Drake May? Because the gap, and he had insinuated it a number of times, the gap between those top three and the other guys was pretty significant, and that's how it ends up. But it was his aim to build the elite roster with all the spending, and he is the one responsible for presenting that to the Wilfs and saying, I need the $300 million to get every one of these free agents to stack up so we can be like Denver, like the Patriots, the teams that use the rookie quarterback contract advantage. And ultimately, even though that is the right thing to do, and even though that has worked for numerous teams, even in that one draft, Chicago and Denver and the Patriots here, even though it's worked for other teams, the results were not that it worked. And now what you have is a situation where you need it to be cleaned up. You need it to be fixed. And how do you do that? And do you trust this person who led you astray ultimately, whether the process was right or not? Do you trust them to now fix it, or do you give them another opportunity to fix it? So it felt like anyway, they were kind of both of them going into lame duck situations, even though they had contracts. As we know, those things are not worth the paper they're written on. So great. Congratulations. He's extended until next year, and then we'll decide again. Right. Exactly. So do you trust him to go out and find another quarterback? Because I also think that like sprinkled into this whole thing is Sam Howell. I think from everything that KOC said to us, it felt like a Kwesi, like we didn't get another quarterback. So I guess at the draft, we'll just trade for this guy who's really bad and hope that he might be able to be the backup. And then they're scrambling, and then they're pulling Carson Wentz off his couch and everything. And that gave them no backup plan whatsoever. I cannot imagine that the quarterback guy who's best friends with every quarterback that you've ever heard of wanted Sam Howell, right? They had a chance to draft Sam Howell 4 different times and said no, maybe 5, maybe 6 different times and said no. So why would they, suddenly love him? I think that played a little bit into it. But this now, as we go forward, as you talk about like the new general manager, he has probably the hardest thing that you can have in this sport, Jeremiah, which is to try to figure out what you're going to do at the quarterback position, because this roster is good and they can win, but who is going to be the one who's calling the signals? That's the biggest question the new GM is going to face here.
That's the number one question I'm asking before I take the job.
Yes.
I'm not taking the job unless I have a clear-cut answer from Kevin O'Connell on what his vision is for the quarterback position. And it better align with mine, right? If I'm walking in there, Jeremiah Sirles, new GM of the Minnesota Vikings, in for an interview, and I go, all right, hey, what's the plan with the kid? Right? Do you like the kid? Do we hate the kid? Like, where are we at with the kid? And if he does not agree with my view of that, and I say, well, here's what I think I'd want to do, and he immediately is like, well, I think, okay, I don't want, good luck, find it your own way. I'm not tying my reputation, because who knows if I'll ever get to be a GM again, if I have my first time, or if I've been one before and I know how this whole dynamic works. And I walk in there and you're telling me either the two options, which we laid out this week, right? JJ's the guy and we're doubling down and we're going for it. Or, hey, we're going to find a starting level quarterback. We're winning with the roster that is built. We need to be in agreement. And if I come in and say, this is my vision and you don't agree with me, I'm not taking the job. I'm just not taking it, because I'm already taking a job that I have so many other problems with. The last thing I want to be doing is fighting with my head coach on who the quarterback is. And I'm starting to think that milkshake bet that I made is going to be leaning more towards you now, because this opens the door for Kevin O'Connell to have an out on JJ McCarthy. This opens the door for Kevin O'Connell to not have to be the executioner of JJ McCarthy, but allows for him to come in and say, hey, new GM's in. We've discussed a new strategy. We've discussed a new role. Like, our plan with Kwesi with the rookie scale contract was good. We believed in it. We really thought it was going to work, but new guy here thinks that we should go here, and I'm going to work with him, and I'm going to believe in him, and it's going to allow this kind of transition away from JJ McCarthy if that is indeed what they decide to do. And I'd be shocked, and I do mean this, shocked, if a new GM walked in there and was like, I loved what I saw from that guy this year. Let's keep going with that plan. I think I'm going to be owing you a milkshake in the Indianapolis Combine.
I can already hear it inside of the GM interview where they say, I had a second round grade on him. You could already hear it. You can already hear it.
I had a day 3 grade on him. I mean, I don't know. I just didn't see it.
I just never saw it. That was a Kwesi thing. I just didn't see it. He believed it. He believed it based on all the
Jim Harbaugh.
All the history and research saying the quarterbacks who throw that many passes are, a lot less likely to succeed. It was the analytics that did it, I'm sure, even though the analytics would have pointed to Bo Nix, I think, strongly in college. But then they sort of finagled this, on third downs, he did. Oh, okay. That's not how analytics really work. But anyway, the point just being that the new general manager that you're referring to our milkshake bet that I said they would get a starting quarterback for next year somewhere else. And you said you think it's JJ. I think it's a tough day for your take.
It's a tough day. I'm glad it was just a milkshake. But
here's what we're looking for the next general manager. I mean, well, if they move somebody up from in-house, then it's going to look really crazy. Then it's going to look like, what? So you love the direction and hate the guy? Like that's what it's going to look like if they move up somebody else from in-house. Oh, now this guy's the general manager. He was right about Darnold, because what we've started to get more and more, and I know this to be true, but we're going to find out, I'm sure, who it was. Somebody will spill the beans.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah,
it wasn't my.
Yeah. Right. Who's going to be the one that said I was the one who didn't want Darnold out of the building? I do think the defensive coordinator has a pretty good maybe standing on that opinion. At least it seemed that way from when he talked about Darnold. But the point just being that if there was someone inside the front office who was the guy in the disaster movie who's like, no, my metric says the volcano's gonna blow, about like Sam Darnold, like, oh, he was the genius, he was right. I wouldn't expect that. I would expect it to come from another place, from outside, and then that person has to have their own ideas about what's next at quarterback. But when you change GMs at this point in a quarterback, if you change coaches, they're saying we love the quarterback, but we hate the coach and we think it's his fault. That's Chicago last year. When you change GMs, you go, we need someone who's going to be in charge of our next quarterback search. Like that to me is what it says, not, oh, this guy can build around it better. I mean, you built around it fine. It's really now 2027, you're looking at drafting someone and you're looking at some sort of filler option for this year. And it all feels like, wait, so the Kevin O'Connell era is going to come down to Mac Jones, Kyler Murray, Joe Flacco, Jimmy Garoppolo, Geno Smith. Is this the right way to do it? Probably not. I'm going to say it's probably not, but that's what it feels like this is ultimately going to come down to. So my question for you is, so if you fire Kwesi, should you have just fired O'Connell too? Because now you have a GM and a head coach that are on two separate timelines, basically.
Why am I terrified that as soon as we wrap this podcast,
oh my God, should I just stream all day just in case?
Have the new GM hired? Like, because I feel like that's almost what's going to happen.
Yeah,
is that this is not going to be a long drawn out, we're searching for our next GM. This is going to be within maybe the next week.
Let me just check Twitter and make sure.
Yeah, make sure there's not a new GM that's already been hired, because all of the pieces and all of the stuff that you just talked about is all it's so true. I mean, this is not a desirable job in my opinion right now. Like, I don't see this as a job that people now. Yes, every GM job is desirable. Don't get me wrong. But if I'm an executive at a really place that I really enjoy and I'm excited, I mean, if I'm in Seattle, if I'm in Buffalo, if I'm in a place that just hired a new coach and this is a desirable job for me, am I willing to leave that job for this job right now instead of waiting till next cycle when I have a clearer picture? That's so what's going to happen with the quarterback position. But the more I talk myself into it here, which we love the game of talking me into, I really do believe that the Wilfs may use this as a really easy pivot point
Yeah.
on the quarterback position. A very easy pivot point of the new guy's going to come in and they're going to be like, hey, you hate JJ, you don't like him either. Okay, yeah, you then can be the GM and move on from him and not have Kevin O'Connell, because I'd agree, you can't fire Kevin O'Connell. You can't. He's coach of the year.
Organizations fail quarterbacks more than quarterbacks fail organizations. And I think having 10 starts for JJ McCarthy, changing your general manager, bringing in someone who wants to move on to their own quarterback ideas might sound like exactly what Kevin O'Connell was referring to when it came to the development. I just wanted to read you from Diana Rossini. She says, this may surprise much of the NFL world, but around the league, Minnesota making this move was widely anticipated. And I can't say that I disagree with that, since I said it to you after we podcasted last time. And oddly enough, I texted a friend of mine in the league because the Twins fired their guy, or they mutually parted ways. And I said, well, wait till people find out that Kwesi is fired, sort of half joking. And then that happened. Adam Schefter says throughout the season, there was talk about an underlying tension in the Vikings building and in lead circles. One source said it had been ugly in Minnesota. And then today they fire Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And this is the trouble, is that all of this stuff has sort of been innuendo and whisper, and this person maybe doesn't trust that person, and this person lost their power, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was always really hard to put a finger on. It was hard to say, this is the thing that caused that. Like, this is the thing that caused the tension. This is the thing. But I think that it had just been slowly building since really that draft, and really since 2023, of a lack of trust in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's either vision or his ability to identify talent or the drafting or whatever. It certainly had seemed like the drafting keys were taken away over the last couple of years. And really though, what causes the tension? What is it? It's
losing.
That's right.
Losing, as I've told you, winning cures all.
Yep.
Losing is miserable. It's absolutely, if I could cuss, effing miserable. Like, it's the absolute worst, and no one likes to be a part of it, and someone always must pay for it. Always. You can never have a season like we had this year and just think, hey, chalk it up to bad luck, chalk it up to bad. I mean, we saw it with Cooper, first axe to fall. It was always has to keep going up from there. Losing ruins everything.
And that's what it truly is. It is not only losing, but losing in the most embarrassing way possible with the guy that you let go winning. That makes it so much worse. But I think that on the matter of the next general manager, who it is and where they come from will tell us a lot about what the future at least is projected. If this is somebody from, that Rams, that McVay-ish, Kevin O'Connell sort of connected, then I think we're going to get a really good sense that, oh no, they want someone to work with KOC. They just don't want it to be Kwesi. Or if it's someone totally who has nothing to do with anything and they bring that person in, this is the person who is evaluating KOC directly to the Wilfs, which I'm going to say this though, Jeremiah, because I think that overall, at the end of the day, the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah led front office of the Minnesota Vikings, it went from one of the most toxic places, and I also thought one of the more antiquated places in their thinking in the NFL. I mean, it was ugly. When you look at the rankings of best jobs to take over 2022, the Vikings are like 7th. They are not considered a great place to sign. And they get a 13-win season, a 14-win season out of it. They get to a place where people inside the building, what you used to hear at the end of the Zimmer era was, and I just mean everybody, it's just miserable, frustrated. They just felt like there was so much, like, who wants to go to work every day? I do not believe that was the case with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And I think that he has a lot of really good things that he does, and his understanding of football and how deeply he thinks about it and so forth. But I will say, for the longer term of the franchise, you can't have this. You can't have a general manager and a head coach not on the same page. You can't have someone that people inside the front office don't trust or believe in or buy into their decision making. You can't have talk about who's stripping what power, who's making the phone call to the Carolina Panthers to trade for Adam Thielen. These things can't happen. So when you get to that point, what I'd like to see them do for a new general manager is get someone who will come in and say, I am the captain now. And everybody, every scout, every coach, every person who's been here is now, I am watching you and I am deciding what your future is. Welcome to the whoever it is era in Minnesota. I don't know if it's going to be that way. It doesn't feel like it's going to be that way, but I would like it to be that way, because what the Wilfs also need someone to tell them is, can KOC actually win for you? Like, can he really win for you? I think that he can.
Can he win a Super Bowl?
Can he win a Super Bowl for you? I think that he can. He is a younger coach. The players buy into him. People want to rip apart the deep passing offense and then watch Matthew Stafford throw down the field over and over again and be like, I don't know, guys, I don't think it's the right strategy. But like, I think he can. I think he is an excellent head coach. I don't think he's perfect by any means, but they need someone to evaluate him as harshly as you possibly can for the future, and not someone who's there to do his bidding and just do whatever he wants them to do with the roster. I would not like that as a relationship.
Yeah, I think that actually would be a detriment to him as a head coach, right? We've seen this. Who was it? Bill O'Brien, right? Bill O'Brien was GM head coach at Texans, and it was good for a while, and then it just unraveled so fast. And I agree with you. I think Kevin O'Connell is good enough to win you a Super Bowl if you allow him to just be head coach, if you allow him to just stay in his lane, if you get him that this is my regime, my era, and not make him have to worry about roster and worry about who's up, who's down this week, who are we bringing in for visits this week, and worry about offense, Saints, beat Saints, right? That's all. The only driving factor in his brain when he wakes up is put game plan together to beat XYZ team this year. Not, hey, who's going on IR? When are we getting this guy back? How are we bringing someone in for workouts this week? Who's on the practice squad? Who's not on the practice squad? So much of that logistical stuff falls on the GM.
Yes.
And so you have to have someone that can make those decisions and truly have it be, KOC, you coach what I give you. You give me your wish list. You give me the guys you want. You give me the people you evaluate. You do all of that. I will bring you who we can. I will bring you what makes sense for this organization. Go win with it. That's what you have to do as the head coach. That's what I have to do as the GM. But I am fully in agreement with you. I do not think that's how this direction goes.
So I want to read this from my friend Sam Monson. He says, this is Check the Mic, also worked for PFF for a very long time, one of the OGs of PFF. He said, my biggest takeaway from Kwesi's time in charge is how little the analytics GM's tenure seemed to look like anything that you would think an analytics GM would do. They took big swings in the draft. They didn't draft in bulk, spent big on things like blocking tight ends, which, hey, Josh Oliver's a great player. Let's not.
Great blocking tight end.
Just sort of exactly what I was getting at about, did you really follow his vision, or did that vision all change when he lost the credibility within the front office to continue to push through with that vision? And the whole idea of process over results, and I don't agree that the 2022 draft process was good. I don't think it was great. When you're moving out of the top 12, that's where Hall of Famers go. 32 is a huge, huge drop off. The analytics show that. But stacking a million draft picks and stuff like that is an analytical way to rebuild. And they did not do that. Getting older players who have declined. Now, I would say that Hargrave and Allen overall, like when you look at the end of the day, what the defense did and how they performed, Ryan Kelly, he was a really great player before, but those are still not in the realm of things that you think of with analytics GMs necessarily, is doing stuff like that and drafting, guards and drafting for need all the time. Again, not really something that analytics GMs would do. That's why, somebody made a comment a few weeks ago of like, well, that's what you get when you get an analytics GM. And I'm like, can you use your finger and point to the analytics for me? Like, show me where it is. They go for fourth downs at an average rate. There's not like there's anything about the organization or anything about the way that KOC coaches or whatever that is like hyper analytical that we expected. So what you'd like to see is the next general manager's vision play out, and to have someone who has a vision for it, but also follow it. If you bring in someone, you know what it's going to be, probably someone with an old school background, an old scout rather than the analytics person. But
it always swings, right?
I also think
it always swings.
In 2026, everyone has to be an analytics person. Like, that's the league.
Yes.
Like like decisions are being made in such a more intelligent way than they used to, which was just like, I love this guy, we're drafting him. Like, you can't do it that way anymore. So anyone who gets hired is going to have a vision for how they're going to apply data to decision making. And there's some GMs who are former players that are the hardest nosed, who talk to the analytics person more than anybody else in the building because they want to know what the numbers say about their choices. So I'm sure it'll have that, but that whatever that person's vision is, execute that, rather than deciding what seemed like a year and a half in that now the coaches run the team. That was at least how I felt and I perceived this. And I know that some people are going to ask, and I think this is a very fair question, like if Diana Rossini knew about this and if Adam Schefter knew about this and old Purple Insider and old Tuesday Morning Left Guard Jeremiah Sirles were talking about the tensions and so forth and not like talking about it all the time on the show. I think when you're a reporter, you have a certain standard to get to of, do we actually have this discussion or not?
For sure.
And when it's whispers, when it's, yeah, something's off there, like, that to me does not meet the standard. But when they fire the person, then it does meet the standard. Then it's,
so there's truth to all rumors.
There is truth to all rumors. but that to me is that it gets to that point of, all right, well, now those things that we were told, they have been confirmed by the team's decision making, because otherwise we're just spreading rumors at that point.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the idea of when we heard this stuff really come out in 2023, that something was disconnected there. I didn't think it was the right time to start saying, oh yeah, there's something that's way off there, because to me, that's rumor mongering and not really reporting. And you want to be careful with that. We're contractually obligated to mention FanDuel. So I did.
Do we have odds on the GM next?
I was wondering if they had it. I did want to say that Sam Darnold is plus 110 to win Super Bowl MVP. And if you, it's really funny because if you fire your coach, or I'm sorry, you fire your GM like right now, and then Darnold wins the MVP, it'll be like, folks, we took care of that already. But if you did that after he won the MVP, I mean, you talk about it looking reactionary right now. Oh my gosh, that would look.
We got it.
We got it. Yeah, that would be so crazy. But that would be the FanDuel question of the day. Like, is Darnold going to make this look even worse at plus 110 to win the Super Bowl MVP? Okay, so why don't we do this before we wrap up this emergency podcast and just
to do another one in like an hour when they hire.
I know. Do they have? Well, that's a question, right? Now they said in their statement, they said that the general manager search will commence. There's no way that they don't have some. Well, I shouldn't say that.
No, that's not true. He was at the Senior Bowl. Like, if you thought this was going to happen, you're not having him out on the road. He's in house. He's doing free agency prep, whatever you need to do. This, I think that it will be quick, but I don't know, man. This seems a little too emotional for me to feel like they have someone just ready to take over.
That's also, like, that's a hard travel down there to Mobile. It's
freezing and it's cold and it's icy and
okay. Let me read you the statement. But what I want to do before we wrap up is just kind of like a final thoughts on this, because we've thrown out everything. But I want to read the statement from Mark and Ziggy Wilf. Following our annual end-of-season organizational meetings over the last several weeks and careful consideration, we have decided it is in the best interests of the team to move forward with new leadership of our football operations. These decisions are never easy. We are grateful for Kwesi's contributions and commitment to the organization over the past 4 years and wish him and his family the best in the future. Effective immediately, Executive Vice President of Football Operations Rob Brzezinski will lead our operations through the 2026 draft. Brzezinski brings tremendous credibility and experience and understands our roster and has the ability to build consensus and rely on the expertise of our personnel and coaches. Some interesting words there. Everyone already knows who Rob Brzezinski is, but you added that. After the draft, we intend to conduct a thorough search to identify our next general manager. So this is not happening soon.
After the draft?
After the draft.
Coaches got the wheels, boys. Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are flying the plane.
You know what I'm thinking of?
They're flying the plane.
I hope that I'm not spoiling Breaking Bad for anyone, but at the end of the fourth season, zooms in on him. I won. That's how this reads.
Yeah.
We don't even know who the GM's going to be. We just needed not to be that guy. Wow. And then at the end
Holy
here,
cow, dude.
Building a team that can contend for championships drives us every day, and we look forward to bringing our fans success that they deserve. So there will be this afternoon, it seems Mark Wilf is going to hold a Zoom, I believe. So I guess we're going to hear shortly. Yeah, it'll be shortly. So I guess I'm going to be doing another live podcast later, breaking down what Mark Wilf has to say. So yeah, that's I got to run to jump onto that, and we'll go from there. So let's give final thoughts here. The Vikings shocking us on it always has to be a Friday, shocking us on a Friday. As Sam Darnold heads to the Super Bowl as on FanDuel plus 110 to win MVP. Final thoughts on the Vikings firing Kwesi Adofo-Mensah.
Final thoughts are Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores. That was part of maybe his coming back. Part of Flores's coming back was making sure that he had more power and had more say over roster moves. Kevin O'Connell agreed, and they decided they can do this thing better than Kwesi could. They don't need an adult in the room. They can do it themselves. They took that to the Wilfs, presented that. The Wilfs bought it and said, okay, boys, your draft, your free agency, put it with what you may. We'll bring someone in next year to then evaluate all of the things that you just did. And if it works, hey ho. If it doesn't, get to packing.
I'm of two minds. I think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah put together good rosters and had good ideas and won a lot of football games for this team with some really good decisions overall. And their decision to move on from a lot of people after the 2022 season was bold and difficult, but right. Like Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Eric Kendricks, Delvin Tomlinson. If they had re-signed them all, look at where all those guys went after that. That was smart. To draft and to try to stack your roster is smart. It's the right way to do it. That is the approach that Rick Spielman seemed to never want to take. That probably cost them from being more competitive than they were, that they never wanted to really take that plunge, and they just kept bringing back Kirk over and over again and getting the same exact results time and time again. So the bold nature of that to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not just going to try to keep our jobs. We are going to take a big swing for it. Ultimately ends up costing him his job. My thought is you can't have a situation where the coaches don't trust the general manager or where they don't feel like he's contributing. They don't feel like he is someone that you want to go down to his office and say, what do you think? What do you think? We need to come to a decision. They have a quarterback decision that is a nightmare to make right now. And they need Kevin O'Connell and whoever the general manager is to, after the draft. No.
Kevin O'Connell.
Wow, that's right.
My milkshake's alive, by the way. My milkshake is alive. My milkshake is alive.
It can't
it's
be
bubbling.
Wow, that just really hit. That just really hit that Rob Brzezinski is the one who
genius, by the way.
Brilliant.
Rob is
fantastic
amazing.
Guy. Yep. Fantastic guy. really excellent at his job. But now Rob Brzezinski, it's his job to execute what KOC wants him to execute. So whoever KOC wants as the quarterback is the quarterback.
He'll be the quarterback.
Whoever he wants in the draft is the draft. This is KOC's show until they hire somebody new at general manager. So this really is, I mean, you mentioned the rope. Like, this is, you think you can do it? Well, now do it, right?
Sink or swim.
Go do it. Yeah, that just really hit hard that they're going to just let the coaches run the team for the entire offseason. And it is an ultimate sink or swim, because the new GM coming in, he's going to have the power going forward to evaluate all of them and all their decisions.
And full deniability of anything they did.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
Full deniability of anything that they did this free agency, anything they did in this draft is full.
Yep.
That wasn't me.
And ultimately, what will determine whether Kevin O'Connell is here long-term or this is the last year of Kevin O'Connell is who is playing quarterback next year. We know they can coach it. We know that these other players are good enough. That's what's going to decide this. But then a new GM gets to decide, do I want this coach? Do I want this quarterback? Do I want this defensive coordinator? And so forth. So the Wilfs have to go find someone. What I would like to see is someone that's from completely the outside, has nothing to do with any of these people, and is judging every single person anew, and not like, oh yeah, this was KOC's old whatever from wherever. And then we know, oh, they just got someone to work with their very, very powerful coach who just made the decision that cost them being successful. What you don't want, this is my final thought, and then we'll wrap up. And I can't thank you enough for jumping on. Like
got you, buddy.
You offered like, hey, like, let's go. Let's break this down. You know, this is crazy.
My wife, I was trying to talk to her about it. She was like, stop. I don't care. I just don't care. I was like, well, Matthew will care.
Matthew does care.
The people will care.
My final thought is when you have your organization, and I know a lot of NFL teams are like this, but when it turns into succession, it's not good. And that's what it feels like. It feels like this has been turned into succession, and it's hard to win that way. And there's only one position that can make everybody look like they're a lot smarter than they are. And that's the guy who hucks the pigskin. That's what it's going to come down to. What you do it, what Kevin O'Connell, and now we could say this, not what the front office, not what the organization, not what the ownership. No. What Kevin O'Connell solely, singularly, he can't duck it this time. He can't blame the GM this time for moving on from Sam Darnold. This time it is on him and him only. If you F up this quarterback decision, you are not going to be the coach here anymore. And if you get it right, then you're going to be the coach here probably for a long time. And that's what it comes down to. Welcome to the National Freaking Football League, everybody, where everything always makes sense and is done totally normally. Jeremiah Sirles, I cannot thank you enough, sir, for jumping on. Thanks, everybody, for joining this shocking emergency podcast. I will be very interested to see what Mark Wilf has to say about this decision, and I will have my written reaction as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the fall guy, over at purpleinsider.football. So thanks, Jeremiah.
Happy weekend, everyone. Football.